Welcome to Episcopals, the public witness podcast where we bring awareness to pressing public policy issues, civic engagement, and help bring your faith into the public square. I'm your host, Alan Yarborough, Director of Government Relations and Global Partnerships for the Episcopal Church. So we're with Troy Collazo, our Immigration Policy Advisor today. It's good to see you.
Yeah, you as well.
Yeah, so we're jumping into a broader topic of immigration this time, and I'm curious how your faith motivates you to engage on immigration.
You know, it's really interesting. I like to say Episcopalianism is a humanism. It makes you reminded about just your interconnectedness with other people. And what I mean by that is, as a policy advisor, I study public policy, and we're often looking at figures, we're looking at laws, we're looking at things that make us different than others, things that separate us very flatly. But with the Episcopal liturgy, we look at our focus on, let's say, something as common as the Eucharist. You know, you go to a giant to get bread. But then we have this person in a robe who says that this bread, this cup, is what makes you holy, and how that's available to anyone. It makes me look at immigration policy, where the point of immigration is the fact that you're in a country, another person's from another country, and that's supposed to separate you. And there are some reasons for that. You know, we have border security and we have safety in our place. But at the end of the day, what we know from our Creator is that we're both humans. And that means there are certain ways that we can treat people that are right and ways we can treat people that are wrong. And immigration status, nothing changes that.
Yeah. No, I really appreciate that. And, you know, when it comes to immigration status and this topic, it's a bit bewildering from sort of a policy perspective. Then you have layers of partisan messaging, layers of racism, of scapegoating, woven through commentary, you know, about the topic. So this is a fairly big question, but wondering if you could distill some of the state of play on immigration, you know, in the U.S. today. What's happening?
Well, immigration policy has been in flux for quite some time. It's hard to say, we're gonna say today, but let's start back and say the 1980s. This is the last time that we saw major immigration legislation getting passed. But since then, we haven't had any major immigration reform, but we've seen immigration go through certain valleys and places where it wasn't that rampant. In the last few years, though, we've seen a huge uptick in immigration in the country, especially due to a number of financial and economic and war issues that are happening in the world. Now, due to this uptick in immigration, we have a huge backlog system. We don't have enough immigration judges to process every claim. We don't have enough immigration lawyers to work with those who are coming over. And we have people who are in a number of statuses and visa situations that have varying relationships with one another. So we have right now millions of persons who are either out of status or who have temporary statuses, who don't have a pathway to citizenship, that we have to decide how are we going to accommodate these people. And the vast majority of them are people who came here for opportunity, for work, and who have had amazing relationships with their communities. And our position is that the best thing that we can do is to regularize the status and allow people to continue living the productive ways of life without the fear of deportation.
Yeah. Well, and you've been a part of this conversation in your role, both representing the church office and General Convention resolutions, but you've also been playing a part in the Migration Ministry's weekly calls on Tuesdays, where you just help Episcopalians, keep informed on these dynamics. So I'm wondering if you can just speak a bit about the experience of pulling those calls together. What is that like?
We decided to create this weekly call because as the Trump administration came forward, we saw that every single aspect of the immigration system, both the legal aspect and the refugee aspect, and also legislative priorities, we're going to shift incredibly quickly. And we saw that advocates were used to a more steady churn, a more predictable workload, and were easily going to find themselves being overwhelmed if they didn't have quick access to information. So with our team, we decided to have a weekly network call. We didn't know exactly what we were going to do with it, but we knew that we were going to bring together our knowledge, work together, and create something that keeps people informed. We've been doing it for almost the entire year now. So we have 9 months of experience. And what we've been able to do is have it where every week you're going to know what is impacting you down from, let's say, temporary protected status, which are countries where there's famine or natural disaster and they're in the United States, or refugee status, or other, like, for example, the Delayed Action for Childhood Arrivals, DACA, knowing if that's affected and what you should do to prepare for government actions. But also it's a way for empowerment. So I think that's where a lot of my work comes in, to know if you want to have those conversations with our elected leaders. Oftentimes we feel that went from a more powerful or a more influential relationship to perhaps a more defensive one. Providing the language to advocate for those who are in need is what we're doing.
Yeah, no, that's great. I mean, it's been wonderful to, I haven't necessarily been a part of them, but to see them and see the guest speakers you've brought in, the different communities that have been impacted through that work, and the empowerment that happens. So I know we're sort of approaching immigration from a broad perspective, and want to turn to what the church has said, specifically General Convention resolutions, and wondering if you could provide an overview on what the church has said.
Yes, absolutely. So there's over 60. We hate using too many numbers in these sort of conversations, but there's tens and dozens of resolutions that relate to immigration. But if we want to have an overarching theme, the overarching theme kind of goes back to what we started this conversation of, which is that humanistic aspect. The church ultimately believes that through baptism and through our covenant with God, everyone is made in his image and likeness. And the laws of our country ought to reflect that, not in a specifically Christian way, but just in the fact that we ought to have it where there is a safe border, where we have clear and understandable laws, where if someone wants to enter our country or contribute to our community, they can do that in a safe and legal way. It's transparent and it's safe. If there are bad actors, there should be a process for detainment, but there should always be a rule of law that protects their rights as a human being, not says that there's rights for Americans and then no rights for anyone else. And ultimately, we ought to have a global perspective. We ought to recognize and look at the world and see that we are incredibly privileged. We are, as a country, we are incredibly privileged. And we have also had a negative effect on many countries that has led to situations where they would need to come to another country like the United States for opportunity or face loss of life. We have to take that burden on ourselves, and that's what the resolutions push us to.
Sure. Well, I know one of the lines we've used over the years is pushing for comprehensive immigration reform. And it's always a struggle. Are we pushing for sort of a bigger package, or are we pushing for pieces of legislation that are smaller, still impactful, hopefully positive, but aren't as comprehensive? But I want to turn to one particular bill that you've been looking at and working on, the American Dream and Promise Act, and just look to get an explanation from you on what is that bill, what would it do?
Yeah, of course. And just to touch on the comprehensive immigration reform, comprehensive immigration reform just looks at the immigration system as a very organic process, or a process that includes human beings moving across borders, and notes that if one part of that element is affected, let's say that we increase immigration lawyers, then we need to look at what else is affected. Don't increase immigration lawyers, but then not increase immigration judges and expect things to speed up. But to that piece of legislation, we have to turn to this policy that started under President Obama back in 2011, which is the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals. Now, when families come over here, either out of status or they lose status, but they come as a family unit, we recognize that minors did not have the same agency as adults in that decision. Now, we recognize that the United States government has to make certain determination for how it treats out-of-status adults when they come over to our borders. But when we look at those who were children at the time, even if they are adults now, we have to look at the specifics of that situation and to weigh it differently. I mean, that's simply a moral way to look at it. If someone comes over here through no fault of their own, if they have lived a moral and upstanding life, typically through their work achievement or through their educational attainment, this American Dream and Promise Act provides a pathway to citizenship, not only for those who are official, I would say DACA holders, but also for dreamers. So those who fit the definition, but weren't necessarily involved in that process back in 2011.
Sure, very cool. So we, I know that we have action alerts, these chances to write members of Congress, sort of join in the work that you are doing, advocating on Capitol Hill for these policies. So is there a chance for Episcopalians to engage there?
Yes, absolutely. So the American Dream and Promise Act is going to be reintroduced very soon. There's going to be action for it. By taking action on our action alert, you are going to be able to reach out to your specific congressperson. And typically these action alerts get, thousands and thousands of responses. And an important thing to note with action alerts is it's not only us who are sending these messages, but we have a lot of partners, not only other Christian churches, but other secular organizations and either other faith groups. So just our, let's say 15,000 messages compounds into, hundreds, maybe hundreds of thousands of messages that can push Congress to move in a certain direction.
Yeah, that leads into my last question here in terms of people who are wanting to do more, even go beyond the action alerts, go beyond our weekly immigration calls. What are other organizations out there where people can plug in to this work?
I would say I'm going to start at home. Episcopal Migration Ministries is one of our greatest partners, and they are not only focused on refugee work, but also broadly focused to migration. Engaging with their website, engaging with their different partners, you'll be able to, at the very least, learn about many of the issues that affect immigrants and what resources exist in your communities and in your cities. I'll broaden it out again for our immigration toolkits. A lot of people want to be advocates. They really want to get out on the ground. There's a lot of need that doesn't allow, you don't need to have a master's in public policy or a law degree to help anyone. People need food, people need housing assistance, and there's a lot of nonprofits that are in your area. So I would look, for example, at Church World Service or at our website, the Immigration Toolkit, where we'll have a lot of national organizations who have state chapters or municipal chapters in your area who do provide what we call wraparound services for immigrants. Those that, if they are here, helping them to know that they have rights in case they are apprehended by ICE detention, or just if they are in need of help, just for encouragement or just physical, those human needs of food, water, and shelter that you can provide financially.
Yeah, great. Thanks for explaining that and offering an invitation for people to engage tangibly, but also through the advocacy actions with us. So great to be with you today.
Oh, thank you so much, Alan.
Thank you for joining us. Stay involved through the Episcopal Public Policy Network and browse our action alerts at iam.ec/action.